Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture of literature. I'm Adrian Ford, and we're here for another poetry discussion. A poetry discussion that comes to us from the hallowed pages of Emily Dickinson, and in as much, it will appear in two separate playlists on the channel. Number one, the poetry discussion playlist, but number two, the Emily Dickinson playlist here on the channel. Both are about poetry, but today's poem is called I Felt a Cleaving in My Mind. If you enjoy what I do here, hitting the like button tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers, and if you find yourself here by chance but not design, consider hitting the subscribe button in order to stick around for more literature love, novels, short stories, poetry. I do it all here. We will do this all together. But this poem reads as such. I felt a cleaving in my mind as if my brain had split. I tried to match it seam by seam, but could not make it fit. The thought behind I strove to join unto the thought before, but sequence raveled out of reach like balls upon the floor. This is easy to write off. It's easy to look at this and think, what a cutesy little poem. Oh, she had a headache. No, I do not believe that is what this is. In fact, so much, I believe so differently about this that I had to go to the internet to get backup. This from the National Library of Medicine, National Center for Biotechnology Information. This is the end of an article about the split brain experiments. And for anyone who doesn't know what the split brain experiments were for, or what they showed, was basically you can take off the top of someone's head and they'll survive. You got to put it back, but they'll survive. They were taking the tops of people's heads off, mainly people who were having seizures. And there is a weird bit of spongy stuff between the two halves of your brain. That weird bit of spongy stuff right down the middle there is called the corpus callosum. They found, I don't know how they found this, I don't know what they were doing to figure this out, that if you saw through that corpus callosum and you split the brains, well, all the activity of a seizure shoots between those hemispheres in the corpus callosum. So people stopped having seizures. Now, don't quote me on the percentages. Maybe they still had seizures, just far fewer. I don't know that much about it. But what they found was that people with their corpus callosum severed had two independently, for the most part, acting brains. So that you could divide someone's attention and get each part of their brain to do something that the other brain could not explain. So you cover this eye, get this part of the body doing something, cover this back up, show this. The person knows they did it. They can't explain it. All sorts of weird little things like this. Basically, suggesting that there is a disjointed consciousness that is still a consciousness. And we get this from the National Library of Medicine. New findings on the unity of consciousness in a split brain could fundamentally impact currently dominant consciousness theories. Global neuronal workspace theory asserts that consciousness arises when information that is processed in unconscious or preconscious modules is broadcast to a central workspace, primarily residing in frontal regions of the brain. Although not very explicit on the unity of consciousness in split brain patients, global neuronal workspace theory seems to endorse the split consciousness idea, given that each hemisphere has its own prefrontal hub, enabling broadcasting of whatever information is processed in that hemisphere. sort of the reason I bring this up with this poem is not to just divert from the poem and have something else to talk about, but what we have here is we have a changing of the guard in the understanding of consciousness. Anyone, I believe, who is honest with themselves and who is attempting to evolve as a person or get better at something or change their ways or whatever it is, anyone who is honest with themselves feels different stuff going on in their brain. You can have an idea, and another part of your brain says, "Oh, that's so stupid. That's so stupid." But there's a part of you that says, "Yeah, man, do it. Yeah, just do it." There's part of that in all of us. I think that what the split brain stuff does is it puts that idea on absolute steroids. This is to say that what our speaker is experiencing in this poem does not feel natural, a cleaving of the mind as if your brain had split and you tried to match it seam by seam but figured out that you couldn't make those halves fit any longer. It does not feel natural to come to these conclusions. It does not feel natural when we have dueling intentions. It does not feel natural when we have such varied explanations of ourself. But almost nothing could be more natural. One has to wonder if this is a uniquely human experience. I have never heard of split brain experiments being done on other animals. It makes me wonder how much consciousness is necessary to have dueling conchi. And it does not feel natural. The thought behind I strove to join unto the thought before, but sequence raveled out of reach like balls upon a floor. Here we have this visual of our speaker attempting wholeheartedly to make sense of what is happening in their mind, but failing to do so as one consciousness, if you will, ravels out of reach, gets away from her entirely. This is the human experience. The human experience, I think, perhaps uh, more specifically, is yeah, these things happen. We know these things happen. And sometimes there is someone so brilliant among us, someone such as Emily Dickinson, who is able to put these thoughts, these experiences into words and symbols, words and images, through which we can make a little more sense of what is happening, what we notice in ourselves, even if we can't completely grasp it. Sam Harris has a book called Free Will, where he talks about how there's very little, basically very little. He does away with the idea of free will. His contemporary, Daniel Dennett, thinks that Sam Harris is a fool for believing things in that way. And I'm not sure they're not both correct. Daniel Dennett is known as a compatibilist, saying that we have free will to the extent that we have control. Sam Harris doesn't believe so. Basically, the example that I use is that yeah, you can play football. You can choose to play football if you want. Bring a hockey stick on the field, people are going to look at you funny. You can do it. It's going to break the rules. You can decide to do it. If you want to win the game, you can't do that. I think that is sort of where Daniel Dennett is as well. I think that's a compatibilist argument. But I think that both of them are kind of right. I think that there are times where we don't have a whole lot of control over what it is that we're doing. We still have to be to blame for those actions. So, what is consciousness? It may not be important to know. It may simply be important to experience. It might be that one of the more human things about us that we strive for these explanations. We strive towards these definitions. We love to have these ways to wall off certain ideas. What is consciousness? Well, they say it basically turns on in you around the age of 4 or 5, right? All of a sudden, you're a sentient being. Sitting here at 37 years old, there's a whole lot of difference between that consciousness and the one that I have now. Is that an evolution of consciousness, or is it better reining in the separate separate sentiences inside of each of us? Is the feeling of being older partly having better grips and grasps on different types of consciousness, different levels of thinking? Sometimes we know, just let go. Just let go. Just have fun. Just stop worrying. Just attempt to be a person. Other times, we have to think very, very hard about what it is that we're doing. Sometimes we have to think very, very hard about things that come up at work, about interrelationships, all of these things. What are we doing with our lives? Do we really think that the byproduct of all of those different urges is one us, or is it just sort of a master us turning different spigots? A little less worry here. And sometimes those spigots get kicked straight off the wall, and we have different outlets of water just spewing whatever the malady might be. That's all I have for this poetry discussion. If you like what I do here, hitting the like button really helps me out here on the channel. It tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. I have poetry every Monday here on the channel, so don't miss that. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, hitting the like, or consider hitting the subscribe button to stick around for more literature discussions in the future. And I hope to have you back for the next one.